Kennedy Airport is often crowded and confusing, but never really like in the past few days when passengers arriving with passports from Syria or other 7 countries on the president's list were questioned, detained, and in some cases sent back. Many were people with valid visas and green cards, but suddenly their futures in America were at stake. Many more people from those countries already live here or hope to bring family members here, and they are worried about that.
But they are not alone. Aside from thousands of protesters who showed up at the airport, there are all sorts of policy activists, lawyers, and politicians working to protect them and our tradition of welcoming the rest of the world. Here to talk about the executive orders and how they could play out for New Yorkers are Naz Ahmad, the staff attorney with CUNY CLEAR, which offers legal aid to immigrants and non-citizens. Welcome to BK Live. And we're also happy to have Nobar Elmi, a business communications expert and former board member at NIAC, the National Iranian American Council. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. And joining us via Skype from Washington, D.C. is Sanam Naraghi, co-founder and executive director of ICANN, the International Civil Society Action Network. Thank you for being here, Sanam. Thank you all very much for being here. Naz, maybe we could start with you as an attorney. What can you tell us about the most contentious legal aspects of President Trump's new executive order?
Well, I think some of them have been determined already, but when it was first signed and when the leaked versions were going around last week, there was uncertainty as to whether the ban would apply to lawful permanent residents, meaning green card holders, because it just said entry, immigrants, and non-immigrants. And at first they were applying it to green card holders. I'm not sure what's going on at the different airports around the country today, but they were turning away people. We've also heard stories of people being forced to give away their green cards. So there's a form called, it's like a USCIS form, and they were being coerced when they landed at the airport to sign these forms saying that they're voluntarily giving up their permanent resident status. And, you know, a few other things that are just, I guess the main thing right now seems to be, and this touches on why the acting Attorney General Yates resigned yesterday, is proving intent to discriminate specifically against Muslims.
So, Sanam, we're going to go to you right now and ask how this ban differs from others that we've seen in history in America.
First of all, I think there's a 1965 law that says it's illegal to ban people based on their country of origin. So I think that this circumvents that law. Secondly, the idea that we have 7 countries banned, people from 7 countries banned. I'm Iranian originally. I'm a green card holder. I'm also a dual citizen of the United Kingdom. But for between Friday and Sunday, essentially we were told that if we left the country, we wouldn't be allowed back in. That's now changed because the UK government has intervened and the Canadian government has intervened on behalf of their dual citizens. But it's horrendous to think that you have Iranian nationals or Syrians or Somalis who have been already vetted extremely and have come here and are taxpayers. We, as green card holders, we have the privilege of paying taxes but not being able to vote. And every time we come into the country, we have our fingerprints taken and our photographs taken, and they know our travel. You know, they have the entire history of your travel over many years. And to suddenly be told that we also are under scrutiny in this way is actually quite horrendous. Similarly, you know, people getting visas, it's not easy to get an American visa. They check you through and through, right, and it takes a long time. So to suggest that there's not going to be extreme vetting is absurd. And then we should be talking about, you know, the fact that they've started. To me, this is about starting with 7 countries. But I have a feeling that they actually want to extend it to other countries, and that's very, very dangerous.
And that was the Hunt-Seller Act of 1965 that did change things going forward. They found there was all of this discrimination against immigrants who weren't coming from Europe. So we're sitting here in 2017, extreme vetting. Do you even have any idea what the substance of that would be?
Unfortunately not. I mean, as is the case whenever Trump opens his mouth, I feel like there's a lot of, high-level terms, great, we're going to do a fabulous job, we're going to do this, that, but there's not a lot of substance that's provided. And so that's why there's so many question marks, and I think that's why people are really just outraged, because to be sitting here thinking, I don't know if I can leave the country. I don't know if my family members can come to the country. I mean, it's really, really unnerving. And so, we'd love to have some substance, but what does extreme vetting mean?
Can I
Go ahead,
just add on that? So we work with people who've faced this kind of extreme vetting for years, or at least what we think of as extreme vetting. So historically, people from those countries have already faced very long delays in processing of visa applications. I can tell you of Yemeni families who've waited 5+ years for their family members to get a decision from the embassy about a visa. So, and people here in the United States, green card holders who've applied for citizenship. Just today, we had a Sudanese client finally get naturalized, finally got his citizenship. He had applied in 2013, and it had taken this long, and we were worried he wasn't actually going to get it, because does this order apply to people applying for benefits in the United States? Right. So to say that we're not already conducting extreme vetting is kind of preposterous from our perspective.
Yeah. Right, and I want to get a little bit into more of the basics of it. How would you describe to somebody who doesn't know a lot about green cards and visas, how this you've seen this affect people already?
So people trying to come to this country will usually get some kind of visa. It's either through a family or employment, or they're coming as students. Now, some of those visas are termed non-immigrant visas, because the assumption is that you're coming here for a short period of time and you will return to your country. And then there's a class of immigrant visas, so like family-based visas, you're applying for a spouse or your children, and the assumption is that you're coming here to reside permanently. That's why you're called a lawful permanent resident. So once you get your immigrant visa abroad and you fly to the United States, you automatically, when you're entered and admitted, you become a lawful permanent resident. You don't automatically get your green card, it'll come in the mail, but you become a lawful permanent resident. And lawful permanent residents have specific rights that non-immigrant visa holders don't have. So, for example, in specific, lawful permanent residents, green card holders, they have the right to reside in the United States. So this order is effectively violating green card holders' constitutional rights by deporting them without, at the very least, having to put them into removal proceedings, because it's just flat out unconstitutional to deny a lawful permanent resident the right to reside in the United States without giving them some kind of process.
Based on no fault or actions of their own.
There are no immigration charges. It's totally like blanket surveillance, I guess, or blanket targeting.
So, Nobar, the folks in the Trump administration were quick to point out that these 7 countries were already a part of some enhanced screenings that President Obama enacted with the H.R. 158, I believe, was the designation. So what's the difference between what Obama did and what the Trump administration is attempting to do?
The exact details, I'll be honest, I don't have the legal information. I could probably let my friends answer that. I will say this, from the communications perspective, it was an absolute disaster for the Trump administration. So the fact that he came out and said, and didn't explain, as perhaps Obama had explained,
Not just to the public, but actually internally with the people at the agencies who are meant to carry this out.
Yeah, and he's always throwing out very dangerous rhetoric, and that's why we see spikes in hate crimes and hate speech. It's because he's throwing out really dangerous, rhetoric and really emboldening people to say, this is a no Muslim ban. We don't want any Muslims in this country. So as far as a communications perspective, I can tell you that's a major difference, is just he's not giving any kind of real substance to folks so they understand the reasons behind doing it.
Now, Sanam, I want to get you back in on this. You can answer this. I know you probably have a follow-up, but I want you to also answer this in any way that you want to. What would you say to people that support the president, support this executive order, and maybe say that this order might make America more safe?
Okay, so number one, I think it's really important to just clarify that H.R. 158 was actually passed by a Republican Congress. And it's a totally, that piece of legislation together with this ban are purely political. Because if you look at it, for example, Iranians, they're, first of all, the radical Islamic, or what they call radical Islamic terrorism, the extremist groups that we see are predominantly from their sort of flowing Salafi, Wahhabi line of thought, and their more extreme version of that, which is in this falls under the Sunni. They're sort of the extreme version of in the Sunni branch of Islam, and they're certainly not. It's not moderate Sunnis, which is the vast majority of the world. Iranians are on the other side. They're Shias, and they're actually targeted by these guys. They think of Iranians as apostates. And as a result, we haven't seen, and we don't have Iranians involved in any terror attacks of this form, around in other parts of the world and in the United States. Similarly, the other 6 countries that are on the ban, none of them have had any nationals or anybody related to any terror attacks in this country. So it's purely political, because if we want to go down the path of saying what is the root of the origins of people who have been involved in terror attacks, you get into the realm of U.S. allies and that sort of thing. But that entire narrative is bogus, because in the U.S. as a resident here, what do I worry about? I worry more about the attacks in the cinemas and in the parks and in the schools, and the gun violence that we're seeing randomly by disturbed white men, because that's what we call them when it's a white guy doing this. So and then if we're thinking about Muslims, well, then let's look at every country in the world that has a Muslim, right? And how many countries is that? And then flip it around and say, let's look at the population of Yemen and Syria and Somalia and Iran and Iraq. There are Yazidis. The Yazidis who have been targeted, raped, killed en masse by Daesh have also been banned now by the United States. So it's completely absurd. The Baha'is that have been persecuted in Iran are also part and parcel of this ban. So to call it a Muslim ban is actually it's nonsense. To call it that this is about making us safer, it's nonsense. It's just something that was convenient. It's convenient political football that they're throwing out there. As I say, what I worry about is that they're trying to start with these 7 countries and expand it to other places, and so incredible fear and insecurity amongst people. And one last point, it's not just about immigrant and non-immigrant visas. I work with women peace builders from these countries, women who are literally preventing the expansion of Daesh and the recruitment of by Al-Shabaab and others. Right. And we want them to come to the United Nations. The United Nations is not the United States.
To come to the physical plant of the United Nations on the east side. You want them to be able to come and continue their work, and they are not permitted to get on a plane to come here to help fight the supposed enemy.
That's right. We don't. In March of this year, it's the annual the Commission on the Status of Women meetings at the UN. Thousands of women, peace activists and human rights activists come to the UN. They're in New York for 2 weeks. Yeah. We always try to bring our Iraqi and Syrian and other partners for them to have a direct access and voice, and for people to know and hear about their work and learn from them. And this year, we're completely uncertain about whether we're going to be able to get visas for them.
So what part of this do you think will have the biggest impact ultimately on New York City moving forward? I mean, from anywhere from visas and green cards to things like Islamophobia. Naz, can we ask you that first?
Yeah, I'll just go back to the question you originally asked about HR 158. So what that did was, I'm sure you've gone to another country and you haven't had to get a visa beforehand. You go and they just stamp your passport. So there are several countries that we allow their citizens to come. They don't need to apply for a visa in advance. They can stay for 90 days. What that did was require people from those countries to go for an interview and apply for a specific visa in order to enter the United States. In terms of the effect on New York, I mean, with respect to refugees, not that many actually get resettled in New York because it's a pretty expensive place for people to live. And with respect to immigrants, and I mean, I know off the top of my head at least, several students who had gone home for vacation and wanted to come back. And then, family members that are just like now really uncertain about whether or not they'll ever be, when or if they'll be reunited, because their family members are in Iran or they're in Yemen. Like, we have this really twisted story now of a Yemeni client of ours who was on the no-fly list for several years, was finally able to go to Yemen to visit his wife and children in 2015, and like his wife got pregnant, so she couldn't go to the visa interview in the embassies in Djibouti. So now her visa interview is in next month in Djibouti, and we don't know if she's, and so he's been down this like really torturous path.
On red tape alone, right, Brian?
So this is one thing about legal repercussions, but I'm going to go to you just to talk about the chilling effect, where it isn't something legal, but I've watched people on the news say, I don't know if I want to stay in America now.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are two things. There's the negative effects that I want to quickly touch on, but I also want to look at the silver lining. So the
Start there. Give us a silver lining, please.
I know, it's so much doom and gloom. The silver lining is that you're seeing people get active, especially for the Iranian American community. As previously mentioned, I work with the National Iranian American Council, and it was really challenging to get Iranian Americans to understand how policy and politics impact them. In all different ways. If, a lot of people said, well, I want to focus on the arts. Guess what? Sanctions and other things, it'll impact you and your work in the arts field. So making people understand that politics is personal was a real challenge, and I think people are now seeing it and they feel it, and so they're outraged, as they should be, and they want to take action. So that's a positive thing. And again, not just for the Iranian American community, for everybody. And I hope that this is a wake-up call for Democrats to see, how can they have a message that resonates better with Middle America? What can we do to stand up to Trump? But to the negative effects, the chilling effects that you mentioned, you see a lot of hate crimes. You see a lot of hate speech. And I personally know of at least a dozen people that have been told, go back to your own country and things of that nature. I mean, it's just really upsetting to think that now people have to fear when they're walking down the street, or they have to be scared to tell their, neighbors, oh yeah, my background is this, So definitely there are numerous chilling effects.
So just before we get out of here in our last minute, I want to ask the lawyers about the letter of the law versus the intent of the law, and the legal challenge that we're seeing when, if you look at the order, it's not very inflammatory for the judges to review, but how much do they take into account the outside surrounding buzz that's coming from the architects of this thing? Like if the Giulianis of the world are saying, well, this is the Muslim ban, and following Trump's rhetoric, how much does a judge weigh that when making decisions?
So, I mean, state, local, federal governments got hip to the fact that being facially discriminatory in the language would not get them anywhere. And so one of the hardest things in any kind of equal protection lawsuit is proving intent. And, they've actually made it a very easy job for anybody who wants to challenge it. I mean, Trump has been on the record for almost a year now saying specifically that it's about Muslims. I honestly am not sure, why Giuliani, who is the U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, got on television and admitted that, Trump was telling him, this is what I want to do, let's make it legal. That proves intent for so many things. So,
Can I just add to that?
Yes, Sanam, please. We'll give you the last 30 seconds here.
Yeah, so number one, I think that what we're seeing, the silver linings, we are seeing the great American public stand up for injustice. It is extraordinary to see what's going on at the airports and around the country. It's amazing to see the judiciary stand up and only as a true American hero. It's amazing to see the former Attorney General speaking out. These are phenomenal acts of courage by ordinary people with personal consequences. And I think it's really important to recognize that, and the world is watching and seeing all of this. The second thing is that democracy is based on, especially American democracy, we're talking about the rule of law, and the rule of law is there to protect the values and our rights. If you end up with bad rule of law, like we have in many countries around the world, bad things can happen, but they're still legal. And this is what's going on. It's almost, the last week, the last few days for me has been, it's as if we've been on a roller coaster ride, high up in the sky, and somebody is basically throwing a wrecking ball at the scaffolding of that roller coaster. And this, it's not, we as that community from those 7 countries are the first to feel it. But this is an early warning sign for the rest of us, and I just think that it's really important to be watching out and pushing back against these developments.
Well, thank you very much for being here to talk about it. We really appreciate it, and we know that the future is uncertain on this in a lot of ways, so we'll have to have you back and continue the dialogue in the future. Thank you for being here today, though.
Thanks for having us.